Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's mid-December, so of course it's time for what I painted this month for November 2015. Quite a few different items this month. The one common theme is Kings of War, because I've been playing quite a bit of that recently. There's a few people around here that play it, and I've been expanding my armies a little bit so I can play at a slightly higher points level. You can see, of course, the Balefire catapult there. Some gravestones on bases which act as fillers, so I don't have to have quite so many models on the movement tray. Some ghouls at the front, which can form either 2 units of 10 with a couple of gravestones in there, or 1 unit of 20 with some gravestones. And then on the right, standing out on the grass with their nice white snow bases, some goblin units. There's the Goblin Mincer, which I've had for a long time, just never got round to painting. And then there's also a Wiz. So let's start off by looking at the ghouls. I only had a few sprues, so I mixed in some zombie parts with them to make a few more. And I think they look quite tasty. The parts are almost compatible. There's very little work that needs to be done to fill in the gaps. And I've made sure that there is at least a piece of ghoul on every single model, so they don't just look like zombies. And many of them have weapons as well, so that separates them, because the Mantic zombies do not have weapons. It took me a while to decide on the skin colour for them, but in the end I went with a Vallejo Model Air flesh tone with quick shade over the top like all my undead. So very easy to paint. And I decided to make all their clothes the same colour so they would look a little bit more uniform than the zombies as well, so it'll be even easier to tell them apart. Also, all the hair is white because I think it looks quite nice and ghoulish. And the bases, I'm not too thrilled with the way I've done the bases for my undead army, but I've done it for hundreds of models, so I have to stick with it. I'm not going through rebasing all those dozens and dozens of skeletons and zombies. I think it looks okay when they're all grouped up on a movement tray though. You've seen in some of these shots here what they look like with the gravestones on there in 2 units of 10. This is most likely how I'll use them most of the time in Kings of War, because unlike most of the units in the army, they are not shambling, so they can actually move at the double, which is basically a march move. Most of the units can't do that, so you have to rely on magic to speed them up, but these guys can zip around a little bit compared to the other units, so it's good to have that option, to have something out there in front to tie up the enemy or dive on critical locations. Still on the undead, let's go over to the gravestones, shall we? Now I have got a lot of these individual gravestones on 20mm bases that I've been using as unit fillers for my undead for quite a while. But considering all my zombies and skeletons are actually on individual bases, I wanted to have some fillers just so I can make more units for my Kings of War games. So I thought, well, why not put just 2 stones on a big 40mm square base? That should fill up a bit of space on there. If I was starting to paint a big pile of gravestones now, I would probably do a little bit more with them. I would dry brush a bit of white on there as well, I think, but since I've painted all the rest in a more simplistic way, I'm not going to start with these ones. You can see them from the side here. I find it just takes some discipline to keep consistency in painting an army over several years, because obviously your techniques improve and you want to implement them, but you don't want that unit to stand out as being drastically different from the rest. So I think I do quite well to rein myself in and keep everything looking uniform. Next we've got the Balefire catapult. There's nothing too complicated paint-wise going on here. The only thing that I struggled with was the green edge highlight colour, because for some reason I've lost my pot of jade green. The old Citadel one, I have no idea where it's gone. I must have done something with it and then not put it back in its place, and it has completely vanished, so I had to mix my own light green paint to do the edges so it would match the rest of the army, and I think I just about nailed it. I can't remember exactly which colours I used though and in what proportions, so I hope I don't have to do it again before I find that pot. The reason I wanted to get this done was because I felt my undead in Kings of War was seriously lacking any kind of ranged support whatsoever, and in the one game that I've used it in, it actually did quite a good job. So if you haven't seen that battle report, you should probably go and have a look. It's keeping with the colour scheme of the army with the green and white on the shields. So all the skeletal units look like they were part of the same army prior to death, which is the look I was going for. And it's very easy to achieve with the Mantic skeletons, because they do have quite a bit of clothing on them. Next, let's move on to the goblins. So this guy that I'm using as a Wiz is actually, I believe he's called the Sneaky Git, which is a metal model, and I'm pretty sure I cashed in some Mantic points to get him. I believe that is the case. I definitely got him at the last Mantic Open day that I attended, which was about 6 months ago. So he's been sitting in a box, and I finally decided to get round to painting him because I wanted a second wizard. Not very difficult to paint at all, because he's mostly just the orange cloak with washes on it. The Mincer, on the other hand, was slightly more complicated because it's in Restic. A lot of the pieces were kind of warped, and that put me off doing anything with it for quite a while because I knew I'd have to bend them back into shape. It's one of those tasks, even though it's really straightforward, I couldn't find the motivation to do it for quite a few months. But obviously in the end I did get round to it, once I started playing more Kings of War, and really wanted to add more units to my army. So I just bent the pieces into shape with some hot water, assembled it, which even though there weren't any instructions, it wasn't too difficult. I did have to look at pictures of it from various angles to figure out exactly where everything went. So really it could do with some instructions, I think, but I could say that about a lot of miniatures from a lot of different companies. And while painting it I left off the little driver, so I could paint him separately, since he was going to be the orange part of it to tie it in with the rest of the army, and the rest of the Mincer was going to be mainly brown and kind of brassy colour. So again, there's nothing too complicated with the paintwork here. Metal colours, wood colours, then just a big juicy wash over it with some Agrax Earthshade, and then you can see there's a bit of edge highlighting as well on the metal with some silver. I used a few different metal colours just to try and break it up a bit, and I think it looks quite good. Then the little goblin really stands out as well, which is nice, because obviously the theme of the army is very, very orange, so the orange has to stand out, otherwise it would just look silly next to everything else. And then for the blood, that's of course the Citadel Blood for the Blood God technical paint, which I've used on a lot of my goblins. And I've gone for a few different things here. I put it on all the kind of mincy parts of the Mincer, just randomly splattered it. I do have a bit of trouble painting things that are supposed to look random though, because I normally like everything to look really neat and organised, so trying to paint something random artificially is very against my nature. So hopefully it looks alright. And then underneath I've done the blood spots on the snow getting closer and closer together as if it's slowing down because it's approached the battlefield. So you can't see underneath, but there are more spots of blood that are more spaced out, and then they get closer together the further it's come in the snow. Looking at these pictures, the horns on the front seem to be quite a prominent feature as well. They stand out just because there's a little bit of different coloration going on there compared to the very dark wood and metal. So I think it looks pretty tasty. In game it's okay, it's not amazing, but it's not very many points either, so it's going to be a useful addition to my army. So I'm quite pleased with what I managed to paint in November, a reasonable amount, and for December I'm hoping to get quite a lot of Chaos Cultists painted for 40k. They're not for me though, that's for somebody else's army, and then after that I have got quite a lot of Stormcast Eternals that I need to get done, so they're probably going to be next after the Chaos Cultists. I'm not sure whether I'll actually get to them this month though, the Stormcast, because December is a very busy time for everybody. Lots of family things going on, and I feel like there's some kind of illness creeping onto me at the moment. Got a bit of a strange feeling in the throat and chest region, so hopefully that doesn't spring up and put me out of action for too long. I'm a bit concerned that it would cause me to lose my voice, which is why I'm recording this right now before it really kicks in. So hopefully that doesn't prove to be too serious, and it doesn't hinder my painting efforts for the month, because the last thing I want is to have an empty video when I'm showing off everything that I painted in December, because I have pledged that's what I'm going to do. If I fail to paint anything during a month, I'm just going to take a picture of nothing to shame myself. So that'd teach me a lesson, wouldn't it? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this look at everything I painted during November. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and I'll see you next time. Ta-ta!